Your stepping stone. In just 10 months, you'll get the skills needed to take the Ohio State Board Cosmetology and Barber Board licensing exam. Apply by July 31st and you'll save $4,500 on tuition. Visit Portage Lakes Career Center in Uniontown or online at plcc.edu.
WHBC AM Canton, reliable as ever, powered by Friends and Family Credit Union. It's time to bring a friend into the family on News Talk 1480 WHBC. Live from the studios of News Talk 1480 WHBC, it's Kenny and JT.
And it is that time of the week that we really look forward to because the Hall of Fame has put together what they're calling their residency program, and it's been a smashing success for the community and for us here at WHBC, because every Friday we get a chance to talk to a Pro Football Hall of Famer. And joining us today in studio on the Kenny and JT show from the class of 1992, John Riggins.
Yes,
Riggo,
yes.
the Diesel. How are you, sir?
I'm doing quite well, guys. Thanks for having me in. And I got to say, I can speak. I don't know about the other. I'm the number 13 guy. Can't speak for the other 12, but my wife and I have had a great time here in Canton for the last several days. So
And now it's going to get a little bit better now because you're with us.
all right, I'm going to have to take your word for that.
Why wouldn't you? You got no choice.
You can tell us at the end of the interview if it did.
It's part of the
great,
contract. When you come back, you have to sit in with the Kenny and JT
Do you
show.
want a plus minus or on a scale of 1 to 10? How do you want?
However you see fit to grade
In
it.
college, I would take the plus minus. That way I knew where I stood. Scale of 1 to 10, it would never have been above a 5, so I knew.
Let's start there in Kansas. I mean, you grew up in Kansas.
Yep.
Could have gone to any college you wanted to in the entire country. You end up being a rock chalk Jayhawk. But you know what really comes? Two things for me. You got to play in the backfield, and I watched this on the Football Life, that you got to play in the backfield with your brother.
Correct.
But you also broke Gale Sayers' records.
Yeah, well.
I mean, when you go into a school and you break... First of all, did you know what you were doing when you were doing that?
Listen, let's set the record straight right from the get. We're talking about Gale Sayers.
Right.
Now, I did become John Riggins, but Gale Sayers. So, you know, you got to remember that I'm sure you guys are the same. You're growing up, you got your sports heroes, right, and who they are. Well, there's no way in your own mind you ever think that you could ever surpass something your sports heroes did. So to this day, he'll always be Gale Sayers, and, you know, I'll be, you know, whatever I am. But I could never look at myself and say, oh, I broke Gale Sayers' record, and kind of think that I could take it serious because, like I say, he was Gale Sayers, and I wasn't. So anyway, I hope I didn't let any wind of any sails, but that's just kind of my mindset. That it's always been that way for me, that, you know, at least I try to be realistic about things. At times there's moments, I guess, but I've never been a guy that what you say was into records, because a lot of that is, you know, generated by opportunity. A lot of times you fall in with people that can't appreciate your particular talent, don't know how to display your talent. And so to me, you know, I don't really look, and of course that's how we judge things basically, is, you know, how much production are you getting? But that's a very misleading, I think, item from time to time. Not always, of course, but I think that it can be. Anyway, go ahead.
What you did, though, there at Kansas obviously caught the eyes of the NFL, right? Mm-hmm. And you end up being a first-round pick in 71, 6th overall, by the New York Jets. And you mentioned something there that caught my attention. You played with the Jets, but you left the Jets, and I'm wondering what you just said was kind of that. Did they not appreciate what you were, who you were, and that's why you wanted to leave and become a free agent?
Kenny, that's an excellent observation. Yeah, I mean, I got to the Jets, and it took a while because when I first got there, like you said, I was a 6th pick overall in the 71 draft. But listen, I walked in there used to be, you guys will know exactly who I'm talking about, Bob Ferguson. You remember him?
Yep.
He was like the bad dude in college, fullback for Woody Hayes. Well, he went to the NFL, and nobody's heard of Bob Ferguson. I was a high draft pick. I don't know what Bob's draft number was, or, you know, what he got drafted in the NFL, probably the AFL as well. But I figured, well, you know, there's Bob Ferguson, so you're going to New York, and I'm thinking New York and the Jets and Joe Namath. It was just beyond my constellation. It was a little bit too far out there for me to consider. But after a couple years, I realized that, listen, there isn't anybody in the NFL that has more talent than me at the running back position. And Joe, as great as he was, he didn't have my kind of talent, because I know now that I could have been a quarterback in the NFL, but I didn't want to be a quarterback. My dad tried to talk me into it. Probably the one thing I should have listened to him on. But so when I got with the Jets and I realized, and I knew, the people didn't come to see Emerson Boozer and I run the football.
Right.
He was, this is true. At that time, him and, or I should say, he and Muhammad Ali were the two, by quite a bit, two sports stars in this country. There was nobody else. Number 3 was so far back, he was like Secretariat when he won the Belmont. So I realized that, it's like they say in those old movies when the sheriff shows up and says, you better be on the noon stage, and I realized it was me that was going to be on the noon stage, not Joe Namath. So in 75, I played out my option, and ironically enough, there was, you guys maybe remember the Rozelle rule, which basically prevented free agency because it gave Rozelle just the arbitrary ability to decide if let's just say I played out my option, took my 10% pay cut, and was going to go down to Washington, and so Pete Rozelle would have said, well, he was a 6th all-around pick. He almost gained 1,000 yards with the Jets. We're going to make the Washington Redskins pay the New York Jets 2 first-round draft picks.
Oh.
So that was basically a deal killer right there. That's why there was no such thing as free agency. It was complete farce. The NFL, they would say, oh, no, we got free agency, and it's like it's time to roll your eyes. But nobody knew that except the players. So that was my opportunity because I knew, I'm going to play in Joe's shadow this whole time. I'm never going to get, an opportunity to actually develop and see just where I'm going to fall, as far as production. Because let's face it, eventually it gets down to do-re-mi. And, as long as he was playing second fiddle. Plus, Joe was taking, he was siphoning all the money off of the other players. The Jets, they were, I don't want to use the word stingy, but it's the only one I can think of,
That's
like,
fair.
I was just telling people, Weeb Eubank was, just this jolly little cherub and great to play for. I loved Weeb. But he also happened to be the general manager, and he was Ebenezer Scrooge when it came to that. So he saved all his money for Joe because obviously Joe was the name of the game, and he was the show with the Jets. So, I figured that out and said, well, like I said, I'll take the next stage, please. I'm out of here.
What I don't understand is maybe it's because your size, maybe it's because of the era that you played in. Why fullback, not a tailback, and you're a sprint champion in high school?
I'll tell you what, you too have some great perception. I've been scratching my head over that for years, and I came very close in late 70s with Washington saying, move me to tailback. Because I at the time, occasionally the Jets, somebody'd get injured, and Emerson Boozer, who the tailback was, and I would, never practice that week, but they'd put me back at tailback. And here's another interesting factoid that you guys probably know, but I will tell you.
Test us.
Okay. Of all the 10,000-yard rushers in the NFL, how many of those guys put their hand in the grass?
Oh, wow. You're the only fullback.
No, there's 2 others.
Jim Brown?
Yep.
That's one.
I don't consider him a fullback, but I guess.
I mean,
well, no, we played the same position in the same system. We've been coach for Paul Brown, so whatever Paul, he learned it from Paul. So we played the same position. The other one, Pittsburgh.
Franco.
Yep, Franco
That's
Harris.
it.
Us 3. There's over 30 guys, and only 3 of them played. And this is the point. There's such an advantage to be in an up-back position, 2-point stance. You're sitting, nowadays, they sit at least 7 yards off the ball. My feet were at 5.5 yards. My hand was in the grass at probably, about 4.5 maybe. And you're bent over. So you're not looking at anything. When you're in the up, and for me, and I can't speak for all running backs, but I think they'd agree with me, it's all about your vision. You got so much more, and so now you buy more time the further you set back, and that's why you can make all the cutbacks and do all this stuff. When you're up that tight, it's just, it's a whole different ball game, in my opinion.
Happy to have John Riggins with us, Pro Football Hall of Famer, as part of the residency program here in Canton and WHBC. Always have a great conversation. We learn so much when we get these Hall of Famers to come in and great stories. And I'm curious for you, when you went to the Redskins, did they know of your talents and how they could use you best versus what the Jets didn't do, or did you have to elaborate to them, how you think you should have been used?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm the kind of guy that if you sign me up and I go to work for you and I don't ask enough questions, which a lot of times back in those days I didn't. I do what you ask me to do. I do my job. That's what I tell people. That's where your credibility is. That's how you build your brand. That's how you build trust. Well, George Allen, who's the coach that brought me down there, he was a defensive guy, all defense all the time. And his next part of the football team was special teams. It was all special teams all the time. He could have cared less about offense. He didn't even really know. If he had his way, he would have played defense, the whole time, which I've got a theory there on that, which I couldn't really fault him on, but I can explain that later if we have enough time. But so, I became the first Jet to rush for 1,000 yards, and I became a blocking back in Washington. And, I was actually an offensive guard in the backfield. In fact, I started wearing a neck roll and black high tops because I wanted George to get the message. Hey, George, you want a guard? I'm going to give you a guard because, that's what you're paying me to be. And but it was such a humiliating experience because, you had these high hopes and expectations. I'd already been in a shadow in New York City with Joe Namath, and here now it was like I was literally pulling a milk truck or a milk wagon, and it was like I said, but I learned a lot. See, I learned a lot. And I tell people I do tell people I grew up, but I'm still working on that. But I grew up enough to appreciate the fact that, listen, when you sign on and you tell somebody you're going to do something, that's how you build trust. That's how you build your brand. That's how you build your credibility. And that's why I went out and did my job. I didn't like it. I mean, I got to be honest with you. I thought real serious about quitting. I'm going, this isn't what I signed up for. But I didn't ask. Hey, I'm going to be the featured back, right? No, ain't going to work out that way. We want you to block, which made no sense. At all. But then, George had, he was kind of his outlook on football was strange as far as, that's kind of there were defenses back in those days and they were great defenses. Usually the coach he wanted his offense to score points. I don't think George really cared. What he didn't want you to do, he didn't want you to drop the ball on the field or throw an interception. Because if you don't give the ball up, our defense will win the game.
Right.
His ideal score would have been something like 5-0, a field goal and a safety, and George is out of it with a big smile on his face.
Do you believe that maybe less carries early on in your career led to a longer career? I mean, your career is so second half strong. I mean, did less carries early on make for maybe fresher legs later on in your career?
I've heard that, and I'm not going to say I have, a certain answer, but let me tell you this. You see, when I wasn't carrying the ball, I was at the point of attack in front of the ball, and I'll be quite frank with you. I'd much rather have the ball than been leading it. It's like walking point in Vietnam. You don't last very long doing that. So, no, I don't think it really had any. In fact, I think I could have played longer had I not had to block.
Okay.
When you got a block, and there was this play, and it was called 44M hunch or something. I can't remember, but that's you and a middle linebacker, mano-a-mano in the hole. It's you or him. And I'm going to tell you something. That ain't no fun. If I got the football and me and that linebacker's in the hole, guess what? He's only going to get a little piece of me. It ain't going to be backbone to backbone. And so I say to you that, in my opinion, blocking for a running back is very demanding. And so, so back in the old days, if you carried the ball 20 times, you might then, and the other running back carried you at the point of attack 20 times. So that's 40 times a game, and that other 20 was a hell of a lot more demanding than carrying a football.
Yeah, interesting.
And it was a lot more fun, too, I might add.
That's Super Bowl 17 MVP John Riggins right there, Kenny.
Yeah, and
MVP.
We're going to get to Super Bowl 17. At what point in Washington then did you become the focal point with the Hogs up front and handing the ball off to you?
Well, there's an interlude in here. There was a time when, Coach Allen was there. Through 77, his contract wasn't renewed. They brought in the new coach, and the running back coach that I'd had with Allen was elevated to the offensive coordinator for the new coach that came to town. Well, I think he kind of understood, and all of a sudden, that was my first 1,000-yard year down in Washington. Then I had another one, and then, then I sat out in 1980, and actually I was considering retiring from football from 1980, but then I realized, I didn't have a very good plan. I didn't have a golden parachute. So I ended up coming back, and that's when they hired Joe Gibbs in 1981, and, and that was kind of a strange thing, too, because Joe, when he first came down there, or came there from San Diego, was Eric Coryell. You guys remember that, throw the ball all over the place, but I give Joe so much credit for this because not a lot of people are capable of doing that. He came in there, and what the system he brought, he completely blew it. He missed it by a ton. He didn't have that talent. He didn't have the talent Don Coryell had, but I'll give him credit, and I think people like Joe Bugle, the offensive line coach, and I think Dan Henning, the offensive coordinator, and perhaps my coach, who was Don Bro, convinced Joe to, you ain't got this kind of personnel, Joe. You're going to have to change it somewhat. And after 5 straight losses, and he thought he was going to get fired, the next week we come out and we go to Chicago, and I had like 100 yards rushing, first victory, and I think he started shifting in that direction. But still, I was still the number 2 back. And we finished that season, and I'd go in short yardage and, and this and that, and played sporadically. But at the beginning of the 82 season that led to the Super Bowl 17 victory, the guy that was ahead of me, he got injured in preseason. So I, by default, you might say, became the starting running back. We played 2 games, one against Philadelphia, beat them. They'd been in the Super Bowl a couple years before. And in that game, we kind of, at least I did, I went, ooh, I think this team might have something going on. Mm-hmm. Because in 79, that team had something going on down in Dallas, lost the last game of the season, and by doing that, not only, we had the home field advantage, but not only we missed on the home field advantage, we didn't even make the playoffs because of the tiebreaker rules. So, but that was the core of that same team. And so, we got that, like I said, in 82, we beat Philadelphia, we beat Tampa Bay, another playoff team that year, and then the strike. But at that time, I was the running back, and so as we went into the playoffs, finally that team, I forget what the overall record was, like 8-1 or something like that. But so we got home field advantage, what we would have had in '79. I went in and I told Joe, which I never do this, like I was telling somebody today, that, I was that guy when I went to class. I sat in the very back row and I slid down in my seat so the professor couldn't see me so he could ask me a question. I didn't raise my hand. But I did. I went into the locker room there like the Monday before the first playoff game against Detroit, and I told Joe, I said, Joe, give me the football. I said, I'm the guy. I'm ready to go. I said, if I get tired, I'll tell you, but if not, let me play. I'm going to pull the wagon. And he just looked at me and, and he said, well, that's good to know, John. And I walked out of there going, that didn't go the way I thought it was going. I thought it was going to get serious there for a moment. But then let's look back at the history of that 4-game run. I averaged carrying the ball 34 times.
I was going to say. Yeah.
So I'm thinking, well, maybe he heard more than I thought he did.
38 times in the Super Bowl, buck 66 and a touchdown. 4th and 1, right?
4th and 1.
When the play comes into the huddle, because I think of Seattle. They have a chance to win the Super Bowl. They throw the ball, gets picked, they lose, and Marshawn Lynch is still bitching about it to this day.
As he should. As he should.
Amen. So take us through that.
First of all, it's 2 plays in a row. Why didn't you get the first down on 3rd down?
Because I wanted more drama. That's what sports all about, drama. No, I probably screwed something up, but
I doubt it.
Anyway, yeah, you got to set the whole thing up. I think Donnie Warren, the tight end, had been injured at some point in his lower leg, and so somehow it was short yardage, and to replace him in short yardage, Clint Didier came into the game, number 86. Well, the announcer goes, and now coming into the game, Clint Didier. He thought he was French, I guess. The name is Didier. And, of course, his nickname to me was Frog. I called him Frogger because he could jump so far. I mean, when he do that standing broad jump, he jumped like 12 feet, and everybody was going 10. It was like, damn. So, anyway, Frogger's looking around Pasadena in the Rose Bowl, and he's looking, and he's listening to his name, and Russ Grimm goes, God damn it, Didier, get your head back in this huddle. So at about that time, then Bill Barnsparger, he calls a timeout, the defensive coordinator from Miami, and he and I have talked about that, and he told me, he said, I don't know what I was thinking. Why the hell I call a timeout? Everybody knew what was going to happen. I said, the only thing that nobody knew is, am I going to go to the right, am I going to go to the left? So we lined up, and I'm kind of thinking, this is the moment. This is, because on that whole playoff series, it was I kind of thought, this might be my moment. This might, and it is. When you get to the playoffs, that's where your brand gets built. You can play well in regular season. Some guys do. They make All-Pro every year, and those are great careers. And unfortunately for them, they didn't get to the big game. But that's where the real legends come from, in a way, because you have to play it. You have to walk the tightrope when it's up as high as it'll go. There's a lot of guys who walk the tightrope, and they could do it, but they never got the opportunity. But here I was getting the opportunity. So we line up, and, they call the play. Now, something that the next time you watch that play, keep an eye on Clint Didier, or Clint Didier, whichever you prefer. But he goes in motion, and he stops. But I remember Clint telling me this about 10 years ago, and I never knew this. He really gives a great fake. Like, he's really going to go across. And he had Don McNeil following him. And McNeil slips. And that, when it's in football, they say a game of inches. It's also a game of nanoseconds. That little bit of a slip by him allowed me to get to the point, where he was really at a serious disadvantage. More than likely, I would have ran over Don anyway, whether he had been, face up with me, particularly because he was coming across and was high. He wasn't in a position. He was running laterally against, we were running, what do you want to call it, perpendicular to one another. And I had the advantage there as I was going straight, forward, and I was, quite a bit bigger than Don. But as it turned out, he only got a little piece because he slipped. And, and like I tell people, if I wouldn't have scored that touchdown, Gibbs would have had, he would have had the ability to fire me with cause because you guys could have scored the touchdown.
There was nobody there.
Yeah, but you ran over
pastures.
That number 28,
clean sailing.
you just plastered him. I mean,
Well,
that's Diesel right there, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, because like I was telling you earlier, it wasn't where he and I were coming face to face. It was a glancing blow. He was at a tremendous disadvantage, all things considered.
Yeah, but it looks like a devastating blow.
Well, you know what? That's what everything's good about, particularly in acting. It's always about creating the illusion, and that's what I did now.
Hey, I want to ask you about acting.
Yeah,
Mitch
he's been waiting to ask you about this.
I'm a big daytime soap opera guy before they canceled him on. Tell me about Mitch Hendon. Guiding Light.
We were just talking about this with my daughters because they like to mock me about Mitch Hendon. No, prison camp. It's like... But that was a hell of a scene. I remember that because
Did you jump off a roof or something?
Yeah, that's what it was. Mitch was going because he strangled his wife. I mean, Now,
Lisa Marie, don't pay attention.
No. Actually, if anything happens, she'll be strangling me. And I think she could get the job done. But anyway, so yeah, I was, I played football for so many years, and I was trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I thought to myself, I said, well, look, you've been playing football for 14 years. That's entertainment. You got people in the seats. And so I thought, well, why not acting? And so I studied with a very well-known, he's deceased now, Bill Esper, the Bill Esper studio there in Manhattan. He actually used to work with Sandy Meisner, the Meisner technique, developed a lot of actors that came out. I can't name any off the top of my head. I know, I can't think of some of them right now. But anyway, the point was that I took it serious. And I will say this, I took acting class from Bill, and I did it for 2 years, and it's the only class I ever went to every time. It's like, this is new to me, but I found it fascinating. It was a lot of fun. I mean, in fact, if I got an opportunity to do something now, I'd jump right on it. So,
what was the movie you did with Kevin Hart? Didn't you?
Yeah. What was that called? The Wedding Ringers.
Yeah,
the Wedding Ringers.
What was it like?
It was basically a movie. Joe was in it. Namath, he was in it. Ed Too Tall Jones, he was in it. But it was basically somehow there was a rivalry between the guy that was getting married. There was going to be a marriage, and so the one guy who was getting married, they bet a football game. Well, it turns out that the one guy, which was us, he had all these old friends, which happened to be Joe Namath and John Riggins and what do you call it, Ed Too Tall Jones. But of course, we do all this stuff and try to, and we end up losing the game. I mean, but it's Hollywood, so what are you going to do? Not that we should have, but it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that.
For our fans out there listening or watching on Facebook right now, what do you want them to know about John Riggins? Like, you're a Hall of Famer. Your legacy in your eyes, what is that?
Gee, I'm sorry you asked me that question. I don't really have a good answer for you, Kenny. I don't know.
How do you want to be remembered? I mean, did it matter, about the fans, your teammates, your coaches? Because everybody has a different perspective on this, and that's why I like to ask it.
That's a great question. But at the same time, as I said, there's a certain element you have to realize about show business. And football is show business. Maybe not the same as Broadway or Hollywood, but it is show business. So in that sense, there's a part of it that it's hard to comprehend, really. What I enjoyed about football is, and I think this would be I enjoyed the adulation. And when I say that, I mean, and I was talking to somebody today. He actually works at the Hall of Fame, and he used to be, he knows Kenny, one of the Allman Brothers. I can't remember which, there's only one left. But anyway, he was in a band for years. And when I told him, I said, we were talking, and he heard me, and he came up afterwards. Because there's nothing like hearing 50,000 fans, pouring out their love to you for what you're doing. It might, it's okay, you're playing football, it's a silly game maybe, but at the same time, it's real. What they are feeling is real, and they're conveying that to you. And that is about as good a buzz as you're ever going to get. And that's probably, at least for me, that's the thing you miss the most. In fact, I'll add to this, that years ago, they had the Hall of Stars in Washington. I think that's what it's called. Ring of Stars, I think that's what it's called. And so, I was put into it, and it was in early 90s, I guess it was. Last year I played was 85. So the other players, there was a basketball player that I keep wanting to say Elgin Baylor, but that's not who it was. But he played for the Bullets, and I can't think of his name.
Was it Wes Unsold?
It wasn't Wes.
Elvin Hayes?
Elvin Hayes.
There we go.
Thank you. I knew it was Elvin Hayes. And so Elvin had been introduced, and Joe Theismann had been introduced, and they're out there in their suits, and I'd already had set this up with the team. I was in the dugout where we used to come out of, and I had, I was in full battle regalia. I had my shoulder pads, my jersey, my pants, my shoes, and all that stuff. And I run out, and of course the crowd just goes nuts. Now I am a showman, that part, and maybe that's what I want people to remember. I was a showman, not a football player. There's a big difference. I also happen to be a pretty good football player. So I run out there, the crowd goes crazy. And I go and I get out there to where Theismann and Elvin are, and Theismann looks at me and goes, "John, why?" And I said, "I had to hear it one more time."
But you looked like you could still play.
And it was well, I probably could have, but it was my mind wasn't right, and Joe had enough of me by that point.
Yeah, it's so neat. All these honors. I was looking at this, and we're reading, and we're doing a little bit of research, and we see. I mean, there isn't a Hall of Fame you're probably not in. Your name has been retired everywhere, Ring of Honors and everything else. But to have your high school stadium named after your family, I mean, I don't think there's a pecking order of, Super Bowl champion, MVP, Pro Football Hall of Famer. Does it get any bigger than having a stadium named after you?
Well, listen, I was the worst part of it was my parents weren't alive to see it. They were both deceased. But in all honesty, I had an older brother who was a tremendous athlete, great baseball player, probably should have and could have played at the major league level. I know for a fact, based on the fact I played 14 years and, played against, he was a running back, like we were talking about earlier. We were on the same team and he was a running back too, tailback. But he could have easily been a strong safety in the NFL. Absolutely. He had all the talent. He had the speed, he had the size, and he had the wherewithal to light you up if he had to. But so he was a great athlete. My younger brother went to KU on a scholarship, and he played. He was a great athlete as well. So really, we were kind of an anomaly in a way. And and like I said, it was really for my parents. I really wish they could have been around to see that. But yeah, I agree with you. That's pretty special, having the field. And then I go out. I still have a farm out in Kansas that I go out once a year, usually in early December, to go deer hunting. And I drive by it, and there's a sign, Riggins Field, and.
That's cool.
That's very cool.
I'm sorry. That's the best.
The reason he brings that up, we do high school football games every Friday night. This is our 80th year of doing high school football. So it's in Stark County, in Canton and the surrounding areas. It's ginormous. Is it that big in Kansas?
Look, when I was growing up, I always thought about Ohio and Pennsylvania, because Ohio and when I was a kid, Ohio and Pennsylvania played the 33 or what it was, right?
Yep. 33.
And I thought, man, those people play football. And then somewhere along the line, Texas got involved in it. I was talking to somebody about this. Maybe they were all along, but all I knew is Ohio took football very seriously. So I can appreciate what you're saying. No, not really, but I will say to this day now, it's a whole different ballgame. Back in those days, you guys had state championships where you had playoffs, I think. Mm-hmm. The team my senior year was basically won the state championship, but we didn't win it. We were voted, like it used to be for the NCAA.
We did 72. We started the playoffs.
Okay, so it took Kansas a little bit longer to catch on. So I've always kind of felt, well, you got to get a bunch of votes there, but it's certainly grown a lot, and they really have the program that they've developed there in Centralia and the field is just stunning. I mean, I had a friend of mine that, has got a, what do you call those things that you can, put a camera on, put it up in the air?
A drone. Yeah.
Exactly. And he sent me some photos of it, and I swear to God, I thought I was looking at an NFL field.
Yeah.
It was that well manicured and that well taken care of. So yeah, the football and the fans out there. But you got to remember football in and of itself, and I'm sure it was led by the NFL, has just proliferated across the country. I mean, everybody is so football minded. Everybody just loves football. They want to keep seeing more football. People want to start leagues in the springtime. It's like they're just such an interest in the game.
Does it piss you off that in today's game, running backs aren't considered a major weapon or a focal point when guys don't get drafted in the first round, barely in the second round, and these guys are afterthoughts?
Well, you got to face the way the game has evolved. I talk about this all the time. And there's a reason for all this, I'm sure, and none of us will really ever know it because we'll never sit in on an owners meeting. But I'm sure there's things going on in the corner office and discussions going on about players' health, and which I think is good.
Right.
And the game used to be, like I tell people, it's played parallel nowadays. It used to be played where it was head to head. Hockey, they talk about, and I'm not saying hockey's not a tough sport, but if you think about it, everybody's going, they play parallel. Everybody's chasing the puck. The business model isn't like it was in football, where you line up and you literally want to run at one another, like I was talking about the middle linebacker a little while ago. So I think that's part of it, and the other part of it is scoring. A team that wants to run the football, it takes them a while to move the ball down the field. Well, you score a touchdown, the other team does it. So you end up with scores, 20-17. You still see them, but I'm sure what the NFL wants to see is they want to see the 35 to the 27 type
the brand,
game.
right?
Exactly. So, and I will say this, the passing game. If use an example in golf, you get down and you're playing at Augusta, wherever it is, and they're down on the 18th green, and you're putting out, and somebody's lined up 20 yards from the hole. But if they can make that putt, they're going to win the whole thing. So they get up there, they line up, and they stroke the ball, and the ball's rolling towards the cup, and everybody holds their breath. Is it going in? Is it not going in? And then if it goes in, it's like, and I think Tiger Woods has done it, and everybody goes crazy. That's the way of a long pass at the end of the game. It's the same feeling, and once again, I was talking about drama and how you build that into the game. That's actually part, and I think that's what people, that's what the league wants, is more excitement. They don't want, to a certain extent, unless you're talking about Gale Sayers or Barry Sanders, the running the football can be kind of a boring process.
But the way you did it, though, like you said, you carved out your own niche. You became Riggo. You became the Diesel and the Hogs. I mean, it all came together. And I saw, hold on, I wrote this down. Where is it? I watched Beer, Beach, and BSing. I had to clean it up for radio purposes with the Hogs. It was on Twitter and people can follow John Riggins on Twitter at Riggo44. So that all seemed to come together, and you guys to this day, it seems like, are still close.
We are very close. I just talked to Joe Jacoby the other day, and Jeff Bostic. I see him occasionally. Russ had, unfortunately, he got diabetes, and I don't know if you know, he had his lower leg amputated about 3 years ago. Exactly. So I don't see Russ too often. Donnie Warren, I bump into him every so often, and, some of the other guys. But yeah, it wasn't my brand of football now. Once again, guys, I go the path of least resistance, just like water down a hill. If it runs in, I try to get around it. But at the same time, you go along with it and produce, for me anyway, it produced the Super Bowl ring. But, I used to like to skirt the end. Well, that wasn't exactly what we did. You had Grimm and you had Jacoby. You had Bostic who would cut off the backside. You had Donnie Warren, depending on what formation we were in. And it was always about a surge. And you had these big guys getting underneath linemen when everything went right. And then you had me, busting in behind them. And I remember, and I'm going, well, like I said, this ain't my brand of football. I'd rather be out here in open space. But all of a sudden, you'd get up off the ground, and guess what? The ball had been moved 4, maybe 5, maybe 6 yards. It was, in a way, it was kind of strange. It was almost like rugby. It was almost like a scrum there for a while. And so, that's exactly what we did. And, towards the end of the games, these guys were starting to get tired. And that's when it's, because people say, oh, you got stronger. And I'm going, no, I didn't get any stronger. I think we wore the other guys down. So
Yeah, it worked out. Super Bowl 17 MVP, beat Miami 27-17, 38 carries, 166 yards, and a touchdown. And to your point earlier, and we'll let you, we could talk for hours. It's fascinating having John Riggins in with us.
Well, you could. I'm not sure I could.
No,
you guys are professionals. So let me tell you.
Please use that term loosely here on this show. But you mentioned that's where careers are made in the postseason. And I grew up in Pittsburgh, so I'm a Steeler fan in the 70s, and we had Lynn Swann in here. And you look at Swannie's numbers in the regular season, they don't stand out. But what he did, Super Bowl 10 in the postseason, what you did in that game there, that's where you elevate your name, your brand to that next level. And if there was a question of whether you belonged in the Hall of Fame, you answered that in that Super Bowl game, right?
Well, I appreciate your saying it. I have a tendency to agree. My thing was, and I was just telling somebody else this today, is that for whatever reason, unless there was something on the line, I didn't like to practice, and I really wasn't very good at practice because it didn't excite me. And I don't know exactly, it's almost like the Hulk in a way that something had to kind of, and game day, Sunday, was okay. Here we go. And, and I can feel it when I say that. I could feel a little, free zones of pleasure running up my spine, little goosebumps. And then when you get to the playoffs, and I look back on it, I realize, well, that's what was going on. It became, for me, the regular season got to be almost like an exhibition game. So, you go in, you're still playing as hard as you can, but there's that element missing that you need, which is all that attention that you get only in the playoffs. And then as you keep going up the ladder, and like I say, they keep raising the wire, you keep getting high, and they take away the net because, once you fall off, you're gone. And, then you finally get to the ultimate game, the Super Bowl. And like I say, ultimately, I think for somebody that is an athlete in sports, some guys go to the, they go to the fire. Some guys will hold back. Like I can tell you there used to be guys that were they were all pro in practice, but you couldn't find them on Sunday afternoon. So I'm very glad that I think I was one of the guys that you didn't see me in practice. But, I practiced, but I just, it was like I went through the motions. And I say, during practice, I probably ran a 4.840, but on Sunday afternoon, I could easily run 4.5. You know what I'm saying? That's the way my brain worked.
Rose to
for
the
better
occasion.
Worse.
Yeah. John Riggins, thanks so much for, number one, being a part of the residency program. I know the community is thrilled with this program, and I saw you on social media talking to Glen Oak High School, McKinley. You've been out and about all over the place, so thanks for that, and also for stopping in towards the end of the week here with us to have this conversation. We really enjoyed it.
Listen, guys, it's been all my pleasure. It was really fun working with you guys there, or at least having this interview, I guess. I don't get a check, do I?
No.
We don't either. Don't feel too bad.
It's radio. So,
hey, I used to be in radio. I know what you guys are going through.
You worked with Mad Dog Russo, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And
is
still
he as nuts as he sounds on TV?
I thought I was nuts. You're right. He's out there. He made. I'd leave there going, well, you're not so bad.
That's awesome.
No, he's a good guy. I like Chris.
So plus or minus for us when we started this interview.
I'm going to give you guys a 9.5, and I've never given a grade above an 8.
It's a Hall of Famer saying that. How about that?
Back in the class we go.
Well, as you know, the song goes, there is no perfect 10.
No,
right.
absolutely. John, thanks so much for joining us today in studio, and hope to see you back here in Canton whenever you come back. You always have an open invite here with us.
I'm like Colonel Flagg on MASH. You never know. First you see me, then I'm gone.
And Brian, our producer, loved that. John Riggins checking in with us here on the Kenny and JT Show. We'll get a break in right now. Come back with more. Stay with us.
The Roadman and JT on 1480 WHBC.